Yeah, so I won't out his identity. His nickname in my life now is Dr. Death, and it was one of the first oncologists I was kind of assigned to because locally our hospital's 5 minutes down the road. And he didn't seem like he had any intention to have any of his patients survive. So when I was like, like I know statistically this isn't great, but I was like, again, I'm young, I'm healthy, I eat well. I think mindset's going to be a part of this. Can we talk about any clinical trials I can be involved in? He was like, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, probably by a year from now. He's like, I don't think you understand. Get your will and affairs in order. No one makes it out alive.
Welcome back to the show, Disruptors. I'm your host, Aaron Hale, and this is Point of Impact. What would you do if you were given just an 8% chance of living? You wouldn't know if you were going to survive for another year, another month, or even another week. I don't know what I would do. Drain the bank accounts? Vegas, baby? I, I doubt I'd do that, but I don't know. I really don't know how I'd behave or react. But I can tell you what today's guest did. Better yet, I'll let her explain. Call it positive mindset, sure, dogged, stubborn determination. Call it a miracle. Hallelujah. I don't know. But maybe it's a combination of all of the above. All I know is Jennifer Broxterman is a dietitian, registered dietitian, nutritionist, owner of Prosper Nutrition and Nutrition RX, CrossFitter, former competitive hockey player, blogger, podcaster, speaker, coach of coaches, and recent anniversary celebrant, having just come back from a hiking trip in the Italian Alps with her husband of 10 years. And ovarian cancer survivor. In our discussion, Jen and I talk about, among other things, she helps clear, you know, my, distinction and definition between, help me understand the difference between dietitian and nutritionist. And she also talks about the journey she went through from the earliest symptoms to diagnosis, the emotions she went through, and the challenges and she faced in the Canadian healthcare system, surgery and recovery, and all the things she used, the combination of her expertise in the health and wellness field, as well as her voracious appetite for learning, all about what she was combating, and just that dogged, competitive determination and will to win and defeat this cancer. It is nothing short of miraculous. So, without further ado, the indefatigable Jen Broxterman. Jen, welcome to Point of Impact. I can't wait to get into your story. It's absolutely amazing.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me on as a guest.
Well, I've been, reading up on you. I caught you on a few other podcast episodes, checked out your website, and I knew that I had to get you on a Point of Impact and share with our audience. And first thing is you're a professor, a registered dietitian, nutritionist, coach, and one of my first questions is kind of a general question. What's the difference between dietitian and nutritionist? And please forgive me for my, being a bit of a caveman here, because I'm an ultra runner, but it's mostly because I love shoving food in my mouth.
Yeah. That's so funny. I work with so many athletes who say like that's a huge driver to why they are passionate about their sport is it allows them to eat a heck of a lot more. But no, it's not an ignorant question at all. I get asked all the time, what's the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist? So, a registered dietitian, which is the title that I have, means at a minimum you have a 4-year undergraduate degree specializing in foods and nutrition. You've then gone on and done a 1-year comprehensive internship. And then you also have to write and pass a national board exam in order to have a dietitian license and be certified. The big difference is not that nutritionists can't talk about healthy eating. In fact, I believe as an ally, we need more nutrition coaches out there. The big key difference, though, is that dietitians have additional training to do what's called medical nutrition therapy. So, basically, looking at the intersection between food and disease and how food needs to be altered for different types of disease states. So, if you were to have a kidney transplant, or if you were to have type 1 diabetes on insulin, for example, or anything that's kind of connected to a medical disease like cancer or an eating disorder. A nutritionist is hopefully someone that still has a certification, so they've done additional training. It's usually not as extensive to become a registered dietitian, and they are perfectly allowed to talk about healthy eating to the general population within their scope as long as they're not doing medical disease based nutrition counseling. So, I actually think we need more boots on the ground and more healthcare providers, registered dietitian and nutritionists, helping people live their happiest and healthiest lives when it comes to food.
Well, thank you. Of course, me, like many, I've been using those terms interchangeably. Uh,
So common.
so I appreciate the definitions and the differences.
Right.
Tell me, you've been you prior to being a cancer survivor, you were already a dietitian and nutritionist and very fit, CrossFitter. And then, one day you go into the doctors and tell me about this. You got diagnosed with, you were told 92% chance of dying. Tell me about this 8% question.
Well, the very best sentence that ever came out of my mouth is I looked the oncologist in the eye and I said, someone has to be in the 8%. Why not me? And the moment I got diagnosed with cancer, I instantly in that moment refused to play the victim, feel sorry for myself, or go, why me? Because I know that's not in my control and that's not going to help me achieve the outcome I want, which is to be cancer free, to still be on this planet alive and healthy and thriving. And so it was like I was an athlete and a coach, and I didn't know my entire life in what I was doing in preparing my athletic feats and the coaching practice that I was building was actually the mindset skills I was going to have to tap into in order to battle a very aggressive, often very terminal stage 3 ovarian cancer diagnosis. And I got it a week after I turned my 34th birthday. I was a super ripped, lean, high level CrossFit athlete. And if anything, that was to my disadvantage because it had been about 5 years of minor cancer related symptoms starting to pop up that I kept trying to bring to my family doctor's attention and some of the specialists I was getting referred to. But they would look me up and down and they're like, you're young, you're fit, you're healthy, you're a dietitian, you eat well, you're active. I don't think anything's wrong with you. And so I was almost made to believe like I was a hypochondriac. And I guess the part that makes me still a little bit sad, and I can talk even about how I handled this, is I went back and I found I had an abnormal PAP when I was 29. So doing my due diligence like female reproductive health you're supposed to do is you get your regular PAP checks. And I had an abnormal one. So you get sent to the hospital for 3 additional scans just to be, more closely monitored. Got all 3 of them done. No one ever read the report. And at 29, the report said negative, abnormal cells detective, negative for cervical cancer, further testings needed to rule out uterine or ovarian cancer. And you always hear like no news is good news, right? So no one contacted me. And so 5 years went by where I kept getting sicker and sicker until eventually the cancer grew into my abdominal, like my large intestine. So it was fully in my digestive tract. And by that point, I was so sick to my stomach because I had cancer in my intestines that I finally begged to get a colonoscopy, thinking maybe I developed Crohn's disease or had some kind of inflammatory bowel syndrome. And then at that point, they couldn't get the camera around the tumor. It had gotten so large and invasive. So I ultimately, I decided even in that moment to forgive the practitioners that had a slip up. And what I did is I thought, what is the best way to handle this? Being litigious isn't going to solve my problem. It's only going to add stress to my life. But I went back and contacted each of those specialists that were involved in that time when I was 29. And I said, I hope this can be a learning opportunity that other young women who present like me, who maybe, express symptoms of not feeling well, that you won't just look us up and down and go, you look fine, you must be okay. And I hope I maybe can save a life by coming back and bringing this to your attention that this was missed. I am now extremely advanced. I've now lost my entire reproductive system in the surgery. And I hope for other young women who maybe don't present like a cancer patient that you're just checking things more thoroughly. And I said, I've forgiven you. I can move past this. Being angry isn't going to get the time back or the lost organs back. But I hope this can be a growth opportunity for you guys as medical professionals. And I was like, if I bring fear and anger into this, I'm not going to make them a better healthcare provider, because to be constantly in fear doesn't make you better at your job. But to offer grace, compassion, and forgiveness where they can learn and then maybe be better for the next patient down the line. Because again, I didn't know if I was going to live or die that year. So I just decided, and I can talk about this teacup exercise, that the night before my cancer surgery, I made a decision how I was going to show up with the remaining time I had, given that I was diagnosed very late and was told it was very unlikely I was going to live to the end of the year. So I just thought carefully about how I wanted to be as a person and show up in the world and conduct myself.
That's incredibly graceful. How long? For 5 years, it was growing. It left undiagnosed, and then how did you finally learn about, or how did you finally convince your oncologist to?
Well, early on, I didn't have an oncologist because no one thought they were dealing with cancer. So, what sort of transpired over the 5 years is that, I mean, maybe it's TMI, but why not talk about it? This could actually help someone in a similar situation. Is it started with some abnormalities in my menstrual cycle. So, as a healthy young female who I know was eating well, taking good care of myself, getting lots of sleep, being active, I wasn't overtraining, some of the stuff you see in the endurance or disordered eating world. I knew my body well that I was taking really good care of itself. So I brought it to my family doctor's attention, and that kicked off some of the testing, where then I first had that abnormal pap test. From there, this is where I wish I would have been a little bit more of an advocate, but giving myself forgiveness, I did the best I could with the information I knew at the time. I got talked back into going on birth control because they were basically like, well, it's your symptoms are well managed when you're on it. This will, just make you have a regular cycle. But looking at it in hindsight, it's like, yeah, but that's a band-aid. Why aren't we addressing the root cause of why this is an issue? So I got put back on birth control. Time kind of passed. But what started to happen is every time I would catch an illness, like the common cold, my husband would get over it in 2 to 4 days. I would be sick for 6 weeks. Like it would take me down and take me down really hard. And then I caught a version of the flu, the H1N1 strain, and I actually almost died and ended up in the emergency room department to get resuscitated because I couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh, you hear about people dying of influenza. I was like, am I going to die of influenza at like 31? This is wild. And thank goodness that emergency room doctor, his spidey senses were up because he was treating me and he's like, yes, you're really sick with the flu, but based on some of these other symptoms around like your digestive health being off and mucus in your lungs and difficulty breathing and just your reoccurring illnesses, he's like, I think there's actually something else going on here. I just don't know what. And so the word of those 5 years was the word idiopathic, which I actually didn't know what that meant at the time, but it now idiopathic means something's wrong of unknown origin. We just don't know what the diagnostic code is to give this person. So I got sent to gynecologists, I got sent to endocrinologists, I got sent to breathing doctors, GI doctors. And finally, as the cancer kept growing and spreading, and now it had fully invaded into my intestinal tract, I was crippled over in pain. It felt like there were knives stabbing me on the inside. So every time I went to the bathroom, it was horrible because essentially the tumor was touching my bowel movements. And then at one point, it came to the fact where I was like dumping my entire insides out every time I ate. And I remember being at work, I was like curled on a couch between nutrition clients. And I was like, something is really, really wrong. Like, this can't be my normal now. This just doesn't seem right. So I begged to get a colonoscopy. Not that who wants a colonoscopy? It wasn't like a fun experience, but because I was still young and healthy and under 50, I wasn't considered high risk. So I had to really fight the system to advocate to get that test done. And ultimately, it took me advocating for the colonoscopy for them to get a camera to go, whoa, what is inside your large intestine? This is not healthy, normal large intestine. Cancer was kind of everywhere at that point. So that's when everything accelerated very quickly. And I remember I work in medical, so when I came to and I woke up from being sedated, they're like, the doctor wants to speak to you in the private room. And if anyone's had that note of like, we need to talk to you privately, not so great news is coming. And I'm just a very honest, straight shooter. So I looked the doctor in his eye and I was like, please be honest with me. Did you just find cancer? And he was like beating around the bush. And he's like, well, we have to wait for the pathology report. We can't really say. And I was like, no, like, you've looked at thousands of colons. You know what you're looking at. Is this cancer? And he still had to kind of protect himself, but he just kind of looked at me and he's like, well, 50-50. And then that's when I knew. And as soon as that kind of procedure wrapped up, I was like, I want a copy of the report as soon as it's ready. And then that's when I started to dive into my old medical records from 5 years of being bounced around. And in that week, that's when I tracked down that document from when I was 29 that actually did show I had cancerous cells back then, but no one read the report.
Okay, so this sounds eerily reminiscent of many veterans' experiences in the US VA system, healthcare system. Is this maybe some symptoms of federalized healthcare, a little ambivalence, maybe a little CYA, a guarded, um, and to completely miss treatments, diagnoses over years until it just gets too bad and you can't ignore it. Do you think maybe that's a piece of this, or I don't want to get too deep into politics, but this is our life, our lives, our health. What do you think?
That's a really good question. I'll be very honest. It's one I don't spend a lot of time on because I didn't want to be jaded by this experience and I didn't want my heart to harden. So in particular, I made this decision that I still believe humans are trying to do the very best they can. Like, I want to believe that people are good, people are kind, people are trying their best. Do humans make mistakes? Absolutely, they do. So the ownership I take of this is like, I walk around with a backpack with like all my medical records in binders in those clear little plate plastic protectors so that I'm informed of what my blood work is, what my CT scans are, what's happening with my pathology. Do I think there was any malicious intent behind this? I don't think so. I think there was a mistake. I think doctors, especially I'm in Canada, are busy, they're overworked, they're stretched really thin. Mistakes do happen. And again, I didn't know if I'd have a lot of time. Maybe none of us know actually if we have a lot of time. So I just was very intentional. The phrase I say a lot to my nutrition clients is where focus goes, energy flows. And so I could focus on being mad or feeling sorry for myself or conspiracy theories or being upset with the system, or I could take full control over the pieces I still had agency over. And if I poured all my effort into nutrition and rest and mindset and meditation and getting support and getting the right kinds of treatment from the right providers who could help me, I was fighting for my life. So every moment, every second, and every unit of energy counted. And I didn't have a single unit to waste on things that weren't going to change my situation. If that kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. In fact, again, incredibly positive, incredibly graceful of you. Uh, in fact, you know, I recovered from injury from an IED blast and was blinded. And then 4 years later, meningitis got me. And that's when I went blind or went deaf. And I kind of, been through it once, but I did give myself the 5 minute rule. I'm going to cry about this. I'm going to bitch and moan for 5 minutes and then I want to get to work. Uh, and of course, once you make the decision, you don't even need that 5 minutes. You're done. It's already happened. So I get exactly where you're coming from, and I'm gonna waste your time or precious energy on.
And to be clear, this is not toxic positivity. There were boxes of Kleenex that sat by the couch where my husband would come home and there would just be piles of Kleenex all over the floor of crying throughout the day, and not crying to feel sorry for myself, but to feel the feelings, to feel the fear, to feel the grief, to suffer the loss. And I did a lot of therapy. I found a really great oncology based therapist in this process to just release what I needed to release. And I treated it a lot like a waterfall. The feelings were coming through, and instead of being like a dam where I had to be stoic and dam everything up inside of me, it was more like a waterfall to feel it, let it move through me, and then let it come out. And she kind of gave the metaphor of like, uncomfortable feelings come knocking on your door, and they knock louder and they start ringing the doorbell and they really start pounding. And you can either invite them in and say, hey, like, I see you're on my doorstep. Do you want to just come in and have a cup of tea? We can talk about it. You can get your feelings out. And then after we've had a nice cup of tea together, you can be on your way and I can go back to doing what I'm doing. But eventually, if you ignore them, they try to get a battering ram and like bash down your door looking for acknowledgement. And so I found that concept of either thinking of it like a waterfall or inviting the hard feelings in like a cup of tea. Usually the hard feelings lasted about the length of a visit of a cup of tea with a friend that needed to get something off their chest. So I did a lot of that as I was processing this diagnosis at such a young age.
Yeah, that I think I heard a parable about Buddha sitting down to a cup of tea and saw anger sneaking around, trying to ruin his day, and Buddha just said, "Hello, anger. I see you. Come join me for a cup of tea." And
Now it's not a scary monster under the bed.
yeah, and then of course, at when the light is shown on anger, that angry monster, and those other negative feelings, you still have to feel them. But once you shine that light, which is the best antiseptic, they tend to go away a lot quicker.
If I can, oh, I was going to say, if I can share one more thing, this really helped me. Maybe this might help one of your listeners. It, I think, comes from a Buddhist ideal, but it was about the idea of a stone in a pond. So if I'm walking along and there's a completely still pond and I toss a little pebble in, the pond will ripple in proportion to the size of the pebble, and then the pond returns to stillness. If I throw a boulder in the pond, there's a big kerplump and a really big wave and really big ripples, but eventually the pond returns to still. And my takeaway from that is you have the right amount of reaction to the size of the problem. You don't want to underreact to a really big, serious problem. You deal with the problem, that's the ripples, and then you return to still as quickly as you're able to. And if it's a small problem, small reaction, return to calm. So I try to hope that my baseline is a calm pond most of the time, but you're appropriately having the necessary reaction, the action steps you have to do in proportion to the size of the problem. Helps a lot when I get cut off in traffic, that's for sure, on this side of cancer versus the other side of cancer, and someone's not driving super well.
Great example. Uh, so okay, you get the diagnosis, and you're faced with this 8% chance of living. And this is when you start meeting with Dr. Death.
Dr. Death, yes, he's no longer in my life, but for a short period of time, he was there.
Tell me about him. And why do you call him Dr. Death?
Yeah, so I won't out his identity. His nickname in my life now is Dr. Death, and it was one of the first oncologists I was kind of assigned to because locally our hospital's 5 minutes down the road, and he didn't seem like he had any intention to have any of his patients survive. So when I was like, like I know statistically this isn't great, but I was like, again, I'm young, I'm healthy, I eat well. I think mindset's going to be a part of this. Can we talk about any clinical trials I can be involved in? He was like, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. Yeah, probably by a year from now. He's like, I don't think you understand. Get your will and affairs in order. No one makes it out alive. And that's where I was like, someone has to be in the 8%. Like, why can't it be me? And so it's not that I wanted to be in denial. I understood how absolutely serious the situation was. But statistically, there is survivors that come out of this. And what I realized is that he wasn't going to allow me to focus on the hopeful small percent of survivability. And I knew if I started to really believe Dr. Death, I was going to die. And so you look around your inner circle, and if your inner circle isn't lifting you up and inspiring you, then your inner circle has placed a cage around you. And I could feel the cage of death that Dr. Death had tried to put around me. He wasn't open to exploring clinical trials. He wasn't open to exploring, alternative forms of treatment. He wasn't at all open to talking about nutrition and mindset and, rest and deeply spiritual healing. And I'm not anti-Western medicine. I'm not all pro-Eastern medicine. I'm like, let's take the very best parts of what we know about surviving cancer and let's find a solution that's going to help me stay on this planet a little bit longer. So what I did, I'm such a nerd, is I was like, okay, if I give him all the power, then I have no agency to get better from this. So I was like, I'm the one that has the power here. So I can look for different medical providers that are going to help me. One of the best books I read right off the jump, actually two of them, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, is one book was called Radical Remission by Kelly Turner. So she's a PhD researcher. And the other book was called The Biology of Belief. And so in Radical Remission, what Kelly did is she found people stage 3, stage 4, terminally diagnosed with cancer, sent home to die, and those people didn't die. And she found them all over the planet and she interviewed them. And one of my favorite sentences is, success leaves clues. So if you want to be successful in anything, successful in business, a successful parent, a successful, cancer survivor, people have gone before you who have led the way and paved that success. And I always believe in looking for patterns. I love searching for patterns to figure out, where those successful clues lie. And so her book, she just goes chapter by chapter, all the different things that these cancer survivors had in common. They're very positive, optimistic people that have a lot of hope. They are able to cry and let tough emotions out and feel those feelings. They eat mostly whole foods. They have a lot of spices and tea and things like that. They get outside and they're in nature. They laugh a lot. I laughed so much that year of my cancer diagnosis. I went out of my way to be around funny people and watch really funny things. I really deeply rested and slept and napped and meditated. And I just kind of followed the clues from that book, Radical Remission, and tried to build a fortress of successful habits and lifestyle choices. And that book was really helpful. And then The Biology of Belief was more about how obviously our brain is not disconnected from our physical body. And so whether you believe in energy and vibrations and things like that, all the cells, all living things, according to this book or whatever you might believe, do respond to the vibrational frequency of how you're thinking and choosing to act and be surrounded by. And so I did a lot of deep, loving meditation to fighting cancer. And as dorky as this is, the dietitian in me, every time I ate a healthy meal, like it was lunchtime, I'd be like, okay, I'm the cafeteria lunch lady, like my little Navy SEALs, men and women coming through. I'm like, okay, boys and girls, here's what's going on your lunch tray. And I'd, put salmon and whole grains and big salads and lots of veggies and big glasses of water. And I'd be like, okay, this is going to nourish you. Go get them white blood cells, because our inner white blood cells are very capable of fighting and identifying cancer and killing it. That's a big part of what our immune system does. And so every day I just, with that belief, practice the meditation of like, my cells are going to take care of it on the inside. I'm going to rest them. I'm going to feed them. I'm going to exercise them. I'm going to love them. And then, if this is too dorky, I always thought of myself like a real life Care Bear. So whenever I did nutrition counseling, I always just tried to give like a rainbow of like love and support and warmth, and yeah, just making people feel really cared for when they worked with me. And what happened was like every single person in my life, Aaron, linked arms, and I got the biggest Care Bear stare of people who loved me. And I physically could feel love and prayers coming to me. And this will sound like I'm a crazy person, but it really felt like tingling, popping, almost like Rice Krispie crackling. And I was like, I think cancer is dying right now. Like, I feel like something is dying and dissolving on the inside. And 4 months after my operation, I was in complete radical remission. And Dr. Death was like, I don't understand. There should be cancer inside of you. And I was like, I know you don't understand. We're not working together anymore because you don't understand. So, yeah, that's kind of the full story of it.
I don't know how tranquil your pond. Uh, I would have been looking for a blunt object in that office with Dr. Death. Just, yeah, I think he missed his calling. Maybe he should have been in hospice care.
Yeah, he kept trying to switch it to hospice. Every conversation was more like a palliative conversation. And I'm like, I am not palliative yet. Like, absolutely not.
Um, it's an amazing story, and obviously you owe quite a bit of your transformation, your healing and remission to mindset. So you, you got to work, and what were some of the using your own experiences, your own education, and nutrition and diet, as a dietitian, what what how about what is the perfect diet, and maybe for cancer, or for just being healthy? Is it, don't tell me vegan. Uh,
No, okay. So here's what I always say: there are many right ways to eat healthy, and everybody's a little different. So what might work for you is maybe a little different than what might work for me. But there are some definite universal patterns in really healthy individuals. And what continues to bubble to the surface of all the literature in the world is whole foods first. Like, again, we're eating how nature intended us to eat. Lots of vegetables, lean proteins, right? Whether you're an omnivore and you can choose to include animal meat or beans, nuts and seeds, things like that. I don't have really anything I exclude from my diet. I eat a huge variety of whole foods, lots of seafood, lean proteins, all of that stuff. But if we're going to get nitty gritty cancer specific, the nerd in me went into PubMed and I started reading as many articles as I could on cancer specific nutrition. So if you like, I keep a little list in my email. I always have this like taped to my refrigerator. And these vegetables in particular are actually known to be anti tumor, meaning that if you put them in your body regularly, they have certain chemicals that these plants produce, mostly from the cruciferous vegetable family, that cancer starts to die in the presence of these plant compounds. So, if you want that little list for any listeners, it would be foods like our Brussels sprouts, things like cabbage, anything that's from the garlic and the onion. So those really white, intense kind of vegetables, green kale, leeks, the dark green spinach family, dark green asparagus, also pops of bright red, blue, and purple. So things like beets and purple cabbage. Broccoli is a really good cruciferous vegetable. Even more common ones like green beans are also known to be anti-tumor. Or if you like, again, from that reddish white family, things like radishes, rutabaga. And then as a little shortcut, there's also a phrase that one of the oncology doctors out there labeled, and it's called G bombs. So some of the most potent cancer foods are G stands for greens, B stands for beans or legumes, O for onions, M for mushrooms, B again for berries, and S for seeds. So if you're eating G bombs, greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds on the regular, these are super powerful anti-cancer foods. And then if you want a little bit of a spices list, this especially came from PubMed research and that Radical Remission book. Again, cultures that include a lot of fresh spices in their diet have lower rates of cancer. So that would be things like turmeric, cumin, ginger, garlic, saffron, the red hot chili peppers, rosemary, cloves, saffron, black pepper, coriander, wasabi actually, cardamom, onions or scallions, cinnamon, and oregano. So just trying to have all these fresh, whole, natural foods on the regular, you're basically putting plant chemotherapy into you without any of the toxic side effects.
So essentially vibrant colors and vibrant flavors. I think you mentioned something about ginger. It jumped out at me before in one of your previous episodes. That
Do you want to hear the ginger story?
yeah, please.
Okay. So I believe in this idea of breadcrumbs. I think the universe drops these little clues that most people are not probably paying attention to. But you know the story of like breadcrumbs in the forest? Not that we're going to a wicked witch that's going to eat us at her, candy house. But I think every once in a while, a clue is left in your path that connects you to an idea, a person, just somewhere where you're supposed to be in that moment in time. So what had happened is I used to be a varsity rower before I was a high-level CrossFitter, and my varsity teammates threw me a fundraiser for the reason that my right leg got paralyzed in my cancer surgery, and I lost my ability to walk for about 4 months because it got accidentally damaged. So I live in Canada. We have very snowy winters where I am. And so my rowing team was fundraising one of those self-propelling treadmills so I could learn to walk again indoors and do that safely. Well, lo and behold, the local news got called to this fundraising event, and I got put on TV as this ovarian cancer, fighter or survivor who was fighting for her life. And this man in Michigan, who's not even, I live in Canada, somehow picked up our news channel, and his wife was a rare ovarian cancer survivor of the same kind of cancer I had. And what happened was on the background of where the interview was taking, our gym name, which was CrossFit London, you could just kind of see that we were inside of a CrossFit gym. He wouldn't have known that my husband was the owner of this CrossFit gym. But for whatever reason, this older man picked up the phone, called our CrossFit gym. My husband answered. He's like, "Hey, are you the guy at that CrossFit gym that just had the girl with the cancer? Okay, my wife, she survived ovarian cancer for like a lot, like more than 20 years. You have to tell your wife, or you have to tell that girl to go look up ginger. Tell her to look up ginger. You got it? Okay, click." My husband's like, this guy in Michigan just called me, wants me to pass on the message, look up ginger. And so what I did is I actually went into the research and started to Google ginger and specific to ovarian cancer. And lo and behold, ginger is one of those powerful anti-chemo or like a chemotherapy agent in plants. And then I contacted an ovarian cancer researcher and through one of his like published articles just to kind of inquire more about the ginger ovarian cancer connection. And he's like, yeah, there's some early research that's starting to come out about using some of these natural products to fight individual types of cancer. And that is something we're starting to see emerge from the lab. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I started adding a lot more ginger and ginger supplements into my diet. And again, I was in remission pretty quickly, which is, I'm not saying it's like the cure all, like, please, I want to be very careful with the advice that you're maybe hearing me give on this podcast. But it was just one of those little breadcrumbs that sort of helped towards my recovery. Thank you, random stranger in Michigan.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a strange call. But I did that story jumped out at me because I have a slightly, maybe, a similar story with ginger. After I lost my sense of balance, um, my internal gyro, I used to be a mountaineer, and I had these trekking poles. So I came home after losing my hearing. The meningitis has stole my hearing, uh, my balance, and I was using my trekking poles just to get down to the mailbox and back. And when digging through my gear to find the trekking poles, there was this leftover pouch of ginger chews. And I remember from being up in the mountains that the ginger it helped with the headaches, helped with stomach nausea, all these other things. And I would just, maybe it was just a mindset thing, but every day I trained a little bit more on my balance. I'd pop a ginger chew in my mouth just for the heck, just for the memory and the thoughts of it. And I don't know if the ginger itself helped, but I think it all ties together.
That's so cool, Aaron.
Tell me, you got to work on your own nutrition and your mindset, which sounded as strong as ever. You were going through a really difficult time. What else? How did this affect work, your home life? After the diagnosis, and you just decided that you were going to become one of the 8%. What changes in your life did you make, or what were some of the strengths you relied on from before the cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say everything had to change in my home life and work life after getting a cancer diagnosis. So, from going to be a 34-year-old that is an elite athlete, very strong, very capable, I had a rough surgery. I didn't get food for 7 days because of a complication with my intestines in the operation. So, I lost 14 pounds of muscle mass in the first week alone. I came out with a partly paralyzed leg, couldn't walk, 32 staples down my abdominal cavity from my pubic bone all the way up to my ribs, cut apart, nerve damage, and extremely, like, I looked like a cancer patient. Like, I looked not good with how much weight I lost involuntarily. And then I wasn't able to walk, and I wasn't able to go to the bathroom by myself. So I was essentially reduced in a day to being like a little infant all over again. So my mom and my husband took rotating shifts. I had to have 24-hour nursing support, if you will, for someone to like lift me out of a hospital bed,
Mm.
gingerly walk me to the bathroom, help me sit down, help me get up, help me shower, feed me. Like, I was incapable at that point in time. And I just had to accept the help, and was incredibly humbled and so grateful, of course, that I had people in my life that could do that for me. But I realized you don't have to do it alone. And so I intentionally asked my community to support me to get better. I asked friends if they could come over, and I wasn't even able to really eat solids, but to make a meal for my husband, who was doing around the clock, trying to work at his job and care for me. I asked neighbors if they could shovel our driveway or take our dog for a walk. I asked, friends if they could pick up groceries for us. I really wanted to learn how to walk again, and I'm so glad I regained that ability because, like you, I love trekking. I love being outdoors and climbing mountains. So I had friends at my gym that would each take turns picking me up. We'd put a big blanket across my stomach because my abdominal wound was so sore.
Yeah.
They would gingerly drive me to the gym, and then they would set up little boxes like 5, 10 feet apart. And I had a big walker at the time, and I would like walk box to box, and then I'd have to like rest for 5 to 10 minutes after just going 10 feet because that took all my strength to just walk that little bit. But they would cheer me on like I was competing at regionals at the highest level as a CrossFitter. And so my gym made me this little course where I could walk slowly around the gym with my walker, and they just put these rest stations in for me. And then when I, was too exhausted or, was at sort of the daily max, someone would be like, do you need me to drive you home right now? I don't mind leaving the workout early. Like, we just want you to be comfortable. So to have so many people lean in and just go, what can I do to help?
Mm.
And I didn't have any pride or any ego. I was like, yes, I will take the help, because if I'm going to get better, we're going to get better. Like, you're going to help me get better faster. And then on the business side, I was a small business owner. So I didn't have benefits. I didn't have a drug plan. I didn't have unpaid or paid time off, medical leave. Like,
Hmm.
I go off, there's no money, there's nothing coming in. And that in itself was a weird gift because it created this entire second business. So at the time, I was a registered dietitian with my own clients, and I just made my first hire. I had one dietitian working for me super part time. I think she started about 8 weeks before I got diagnosed with cancer. So I sat down with her when I got the news and I said, here's what's happening. Like, I'm going off to get surgery. I know this is bad. I don't know how bad it is. I fully trust and believe in you. Do you feel comfortable that if I hand over my caseload, it's like I'm going on a mat leave, just in a little bit of a different scenario. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on video and I'm going to record a whole bunch of stuff. Some of the fun mindset games I play with my nutrition clients, just some of the storytelling that I do to help people get over their self-sabotaging ways and
Hmm.
really start to make progress and get results. Because I was like, yeah, you kind of know the like basics from school, but I'm like, here's where the magic actually happens in real counseling. And I started to make this little video library, and I had to completely trust that by delegating, she was a very capable person. Like I said, I always believe the best in people, and that my business wasn't going to burn to the ground in my absence. So I basically had to be like a manager from a hospital bed, but give her the space to figure it out while also still being there from afar to mentor her. And that she did so well, and she stayed with me and was so loyal, and then the business grew in my absence of getting treated for cancer. So I was like, okay, it's not just me that's special, it's this style and system of nutrition coaching that is really working. And so from there, I turned that into a full nutrition certification, because I use this just internally as like a quality assurance kind of training program. So every new hire, if someone was coming on my team, would
Hmm.
go through this little video library I had made just for my staff. And then other gyms started to hear about it and they're like, can my coach go through your program like they're going to work for you, but they're going to work for me? Can I just pay you a little bit of money to like get my coach trained like you train your team? And because I just had such a positive but thorough and organized training system, that became my Prosper Nutrition Certification Company, which if I didn't have cancer, I would have never packaged this, because out of necessity, I had to take what was in my brain and organize it so someone else could follow along. So it was a weird work shift as a result of, it's kind of I always used to read the book Tim Ferriss, The 4 Hour Work Week. Not that I fully believe in only working 4 hours. Like, I love what I do, but I like the mindset exercise of, if you put a constraint on yourself and you could only work for 4 hours a week, what are the most valuable actions that you're going to do to make your business be successful, where you pull more of yourself out of it? And I was, put in the fire and had to live by that, because I probably could only work about 4 hours a week for a number of months.
So before the cancer, you did the nutrition coaching, and then because of the cancer, you, you developed a whole another business, coach the coach business. That's incredible. And okay, so tell me about the nutrition coaching. And are you coaching athletes, people who are trying to lose weight, everybody, uh, all of the above?
Yeah, so I think like any new business owner, when you just start out, you try to be something to everyone, which is a great way to just test the waters and find where you're more passionate or more skilled. As time goes on, I think developing more of a niche or a niche is a good idea. And so what I started to learn where I was really, really good as a coach was kind of in two, three areas, and that's where I mostly spend my time today. So the first is, believe it or not, I love helping everyday average folks lose weight and take really good care of themselves, because there's an element of, they've tried and tried and tried on their own, and the information's out there, but I think the magic is in the mindset part when it comes to weight loss and healthy eating. So I love mindset, if you can probably tell, and I love making things fun And so I was very good at using mindset and games and fun to help people lose weight. The second area I always was well sought out for was high performance athletes. So I've worked with a lot of the Canadian Olympic athletes and like weight class sports like rowing and bobsled. I've done some stuff with the national like hockey team. I've done some stuff with NHL and the NHL hockey players. And again, I love that like dialing in the precision to help achieve elite excellence, elite performance. And my third and final favorite area, believe it or not, is all about eating disorder recovery. Taking people that have a really broken, shattered relationship with food. The inner bully work that we do in eating disorders, the mindset piece is so, so important. And I get so much happiness in seeing someone that was terrified to eat out, hasn't been on a date in forever, is, can't have birthday cake at their child's birthday party, lives in constant fear, and to help them build the confidence and strength and skills to navigate a tricky relationship with food where again they have body confidence, they feel secure in their nutrition, they have more energy. I've helped so many women who couldn't get pregnant because of disordered eating or full-blown eating disorders welcome children into this world where they're so happy to be parents now. You really see someone get their life back when they fight a serious illness like an eating disorder. And I think that coaching helped me fight the scariness of the cancer, because you're in this like tangled beast that keeps growing. The more you try to ignore it, it doesn't get better by itself.
I definitely know the difference in way, that short-term good feeling that you get from maybe junk food, and then the sad feeling after. and difference between that and the more sustaining, good feelings when somebody says, "You're taking care of yourself. You're looking pretty good." And but tell me how this plays. How do you do this tactically for mindset when it comes to your coaching? I've never had a nutritionist. So is it not just?
You want to play a couple games? Can I use you as my tester, and we'll play some games together, and I can actually show you in real time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So one of my favorite ones I always kick off with is, I call it the toothbrush game. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Be super honest, yes or no, with your answers. Okay, so Aaron, did you brush your teeth last night?
Did I what?
Brush your teeth last night.
Did I? Yes.
Awesome. Now, this is a little embarrassing. I'm going to admit this myself. Have you at least one time gone to bed and not brushed your teeth before you went to sleep? Have you ever skipped brushing your teeth?
Sure.
Yeah, I have too. Not often, but it happens. So imagine today, for whatever reason, you don't brush your teeth before you go to bed. How are you going to handle that tomorrow? How are you going to problem solve it?
The next time I go to bed, or just when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to swish a little bit more, brush a little bit longer.
Yep. You notice what you did. The soonest opportunity is you got right back on track.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't go, "Oh, I blew it. Well, this week's a write-off. I guess I'm going to not brush my teeth because I have to wait for the perfect time to get back into it." You didn't delay it till Monday. You didn't wait till after a vacation. You're not waiting for the perfect time. You're just like, "Oops, no big deal. Soonest opportunity. Let's fix it." But I want to point out two more things to brushing your teeth. So I always think about this iceberg of success where habits, environment, and mindset are stacked on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at the habits at the top, which is brushing your teeth, notice the level that supports a good habit. It's the environment around you. So if your washroom or your bathroom has your toothbrush and toothpaste right there beside the sink, you're going to be way more likely to be consistent than if it's like a weird elf on the shelf game where every day your toothbrush moves to a different location around your house. Do you think you'd be as consistent if you had to go searching for your toothbrush every single night before you brushed your teeth? No way. Like, it's not happening. And then finally, notice the bottom layer. And this is going to piggyback into my second mindset game with you. The bottom layer is all about our mindset and our self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
So if you evaluate your self-talk with missing brushing your teeth, notice that it is forgiving, gets over it really quickly, and it just asks you to get back on track. So your mindset goes, no big deal, get back on track as soon as possible. I forgive you. It's not a big issue. It doesn't create a mountain out of a molehill and have an overreaction, right? You don't call your dentist in a panic or swear off brushing your teeth for a week because you're such a bad person. It's like, it's not a big deal. Let's fix it quickly. So here is another mindset game I use a lot with nutrition coaching. I call the mindset game the 3 voices. Voice number 1 is our inner bully. Voice number 2 is a curious detective. Voice number 3 is our wise guide, a loving, wise guide, kind of like a mountaineer guide that's going to get us up the mountain safely. Now, the good news is we can do a 2 against 1. The inner bully is a jerk. It scolds us, it criticizes us, it shames us, or it can get stuck focusing on things not in our control, right? I could be mad at Dr. Death and get all wrapped up in the healthcare system, but hanging out with the bully might feel okay, but it really doesn't solve any problems. So we want to almost duct tape the inner bully's mouth, and we do not want it calling the shots. So the curious detective is the next interesting voice. I look at it for patterns and clues. Remember I said earlier, success leaves clues? So my detective goes around and all it does is it notices in names. Like you said, when I eat a bunch of junk food, it tastes good for 5 minutes and then I feel terrible 3 hours, 4 hours later. I'm tired, I'm sluggish, I don't want to get off the couch, I don't like how I feel. Or it might be, man, if I don't go to bed on time and I stay up scrolling on social media, I'm less likely to wake up and do my workout in the morning at the gym. So I notice that when I hold a disciplined bedtime, I feel better, I sleep better, and I wake up and I exercise more consistently. It might be that I notice that when I'm drinking lots of water and don't drink alcohol very often, I have tons of energy and I get better sleep. It might also be, you can notice negative things, and that's okay too. I notice when I hang around so-and-so, I complain more and I get into gossip and I just kind of like talk about meaningless negative things and I never feel great after I'm around that person. So your detective is just having a notebook filled with pages of observations. And then what it does is it can give that notebook to the wise guide. And the wise guide is now, think of it like your mountain guide to the top of the mountain going, I know your goals. I see the top of where I want to take you. Here would be my path I'd recommend, knowing you and your circumstances. So it might be, you tend to get a big slump in the afternoon. Instead of going for sugar, you've seen this pattern of a chocolate bar makes you feel energetic and then you crash. Maybe at 2:45, you actually just need to go outside for 10 minutes and stop looking at a screen and get sunshine on your skin and breathe the fresh air. That will feel better than the chocolate bar. And maybe you try it. So it's kind of cool because you're not mad at yourself for bad or whatever patterns. You're just allowing your detective to notice your flow, how you show up, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And you try to give that book of patterns to your wise guide, who then tries to make positive decisions for you moment by moment. Will you falter? Yeah. You just have your detective learn from the mistake. That's all that a mistake is it's teaching you valuable information about how yourself or how your world works. So that's a mindset game I use all the time because people get so stuck with their inner bully, and your inner bully does not help you get to where you want to go.
Great examples. Yeah, I love your use of metaphors and entire conversation. It's fantastic. Yeah, well, I think storytelling is an excellent way for people to learn. So it really it sticks in people's minds. So I think that's fantastic. You said you did going back to Dr. Death, does he know that you survived after?
So I bumped into him once from afar. We were out in our home city where I live, and I think we were out grocery shopping, and I could tell he caught me from across the grocery store. And there was this look of shock or surprise on his face. And again, he was far away. It wasn't like I was going to run up to him and be like, haha, I thought you never see me here. And you know what? In my heart, there's no like he was just a short-term person in this medical journey that, I leapfrogged from him to a much better oncologist where I found myself in a clinical trial. So I'm glad he got to see that I'm here. Maybe it made him stop and reflect, like, oh yeah, maybe these people can live a little bit longer than we thought, but only one time in passing, and that's okay.
I don't know. My personality, my humor, I would have given him a great big bow. I don't know. Yeah, just give him a wink in the gun. I don't know. Something with a flourish, just to let him know
Yeah,
that you're still
I'm still here
around.
and kicking. Yeah.
But I also appreciate the fact that you went back with an open mind to all of the caregivers along the way and said, "I'm not looking to burn anybody." You gotta use this as a teaching point. It's pretty excellent. Well, you know what? We're getting close to the end of the hour, and I want to go into the final segment of the interview. Call it the countdown to impact. And it's 3, 2, 1. 3 books or resources, 2 quotes, and 1 person, each that impacted your life.
So books first. I mean, I read a lot of books, so it's hard to narrow it down to just 3. But maybe I'll stick on this topic that we were on
Mm-hmm.
today. So the first book would probably be A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. What a good book on keeping things in perspective, and also just if you're looking for some mindset training, that is an excellent book. Specific to cancer, I think Radical Remission saved my life. Like, that's not maybe a
Mm-hmm.
book relevant to everyone, but truly, even for cancer prevention, or if you know someone that has cancer, I highly recommend that book. Um, and the last one, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball here. And it's kind of a toss up between 2. I don't know if I can give 4 books instead of 3. Is that like breaking your rules?
I won't tell.
Okay. I'm really into minimalism and essentialism. And so the 2 books on that topic is the book Essentialism by McEwen, and as well as, this will sound kind of cheesy, but Marie Kondo's Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. In that, realizing that nothing is permanent, trying to not hang on to everything forever. So the book for me, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and I am a minimalist at heart. I try to tread really lightly. I live in a small house. I don't have a ton of possessions on purpose, is not about the physical stuff. It's that we don't need to hang on to the emotional baggage forever. And I found a really healing process by decluttering and getting rid of the physical. It allowed a lot of the negative to move out too. And her whole thing is, if it doesn't give you joy, let it go. And that helped more on the medical side of what I was going through, even though I know it's a book about decluttering. So I don't know if that's kind of a cheesy example, but it had a big impact on me in a positive way.
Speaking of that, hanging on to clutter, nostalgia comes from comes from Greek words meaning the pain of knowledge. Some things we hold on to, maybe it's better if we just let it go. Also, McEwen, author of Essentialism, he's got another great book called Effortless.
Yes, I love that book as well.
Love that one. Okay. Uh, 2 quotes or lessons learned.
Okay. One of my favorites, I don't know if I made this quote up. I say this quote all the time to my nutrition clients, is do the best you can where you are with what you have. And what that just allows me to do every day is be okay that my best effort goes up and down, but I'm always able to do something. And it just allows me so much grace and so much compassion, because moment by moment, what's the best food choice I can make? What's the best exercise choice? What's the best self-care and sleep choice? So it just keeps me moving forward towards excellence, because I'm imperfectly always trying to do a good job. So I love that quote. Do the best you can where you are with what you have. My other favorite one, well, I have 3 words, and they're over top of my bulletin board beside my bed. It's not really a quote. It's just like 3 words I try to bring into every day: happiness, joy, and love. So if what can come out of me every day is happiness, joy, and love, then it's going to be a good day by the end of the day. So it's not a quote per se, but it's 3 really, really powerful words.
Great. And one person that's made an impact in your life.
So many people I have to thank that have really impacted me. But I'm going to go back to an athletic time. And it was my varsity rowing coach, John Armitage, who I actually did a project on in university when we had to find a leader and talk about their leadership style. And he is a servant leader. And what John did for me is he believed in me when no one else did. I was really late to join the sport of rowing, and he saw the potential in me for where I could go, and just always made me feel like I belonged even when I didn't have that confidence yet. And he taught me a lot about how to be a really good teammate, a really good individual athlete, but also how to be, he was the best example of being a true teammate within a sporting environment. So I'm very grateful to John. He totally changed the trajectory of my athletic career and helped me become a really good high-level athlete.
I've heard the saying that there are no bad teams, only bad coaches. So I think that's fantastic. Excellent examples of all. And you said you also, I failed when asking for 3 books or resources. And you said you had a resource yourself, a game?
Yes. So it kind of connects to the story earlier. And the final resource, if I can share it with your audience for free, is it's called the teacup exercise. So I'll give you the story and then you can download it and fill in your own teacup. The story goes like this. You are walking along and someone bumps into you and coffee comes flying out of your cup. Why did coffee come out of your cup? Because someone bumped you, of course. Nope, wrong answer. Coffee just came out of your cup because you chose to pour coffee in your cup. Had there been tea or water in your cup, that's what would have come out. So it's easy to fake it when life is good, but inevitably life is going to rattle you and bump you. And if you haven't thought about what you've put in your cup, that is what comes spilling out. So the exercise is a blank teacup with space for the words you want to embody and you want to hold. So the night before I had my cancer operation, I sat down with my blank teacup and I basically was like, this is going to be a rough ride. What needs to come out of me as I get bumped along this journey? And so I wrote happiness, joy, and love, those 3 words. I wrote courage. I wrote being a hard worker. I think I wrote, being brave, being kind, being honest. And as rough things were happening with Dr. Death and whatever, I kept looking at that teacup of those words. And I was prepared that I was going to die that year. And I thought, if this is my last year of life, if I can show up with happiness, joy, love, courage, resilience, that was one of my words, this is going to be good no matter how much time I get. So the exercise, if you'd like to have access to it, is if you go to prospernutritioncoaching.com/teacup. You can download your own teacup with the framework and the story and all of that. And I would highly encourage you choose your words. So maybe can I ask you a question, Aaron?
Please do.
What words would go into your teacup if you're thinking about the metaphorical cup of what spills out of you?
Well, if it's full of hot coffee and somebody bumps into me, what's spilling out is profanity. But hopefully, if anybody bumps into me, it's empathy. Because if they're bumping into me, something's distracting them in their world.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't know. For me, I just try to fill my cup with abundance, happiness. Maybe try to fit in a little humility from time to time. That's about it.
That's amazing.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. Are there any other links or contact addresses you'd like to share, or just go to the teacup exercise from
For
that.
sure. I mean, the teacup is a great way to give you guys some value. I give away tons of free coaching resources for coaches of all kinds. So if you go to prospernutritioncoaching.com, there's a big, huge freebie section where you can help yourself to. We have like a little lift-off mindset coaching course that's completely free that actually gives you some takeaway resources and games, but it's all about mindset coaching inside of healthy eating and nutrition. So that's probably a great one to leave with you guys. And if you want to just follow along on this crazy journey of life, I can be found on Instagram at prosper_NC or on YouTube at Prosper Nutrition. And I share lots about healthy eating and coaching and cancer survivorship there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story with our audience. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Aaron.